Lorelei Ashton Crane, 37 years old, sat in the back of a black car on a Tuesday morning and watched her husband sign the divorce papers on the hood of his Mercedes like it was nothing more than a receipt. He didn't look up when she got out of the car. He didn't look up when her heels touched the gravel of the driveway they had shared for 9 years. He only looked up when his mother, Gwendolyn Crane, 71, the woman who had built the Crane name into something people recognized at charity dinners and real estate auctions, touched his shoulder and said, "It's done, Elliot. Let it be done." And then Elliot Crane, 42, founder and CEO of Crane Capital Group, looked at his wife of 9 years and said the 4 words that would define the rest of his life in ways he could not yet understand. "You can keep the watch." The watch was a Cartier he had given her on their 5th anniversary. The firm, the one Lorelei had quietly incorporated under a subsidiary holding company 3 years ago, was not on his mind at all. That was the problem with Elliot Crane. He was very good at underestimating things that didn't announce themselves loudly. Lorelei had met Elliot at 31 at a fundraiser in downtown Atlanta. She was a financial analyst at Mercer & Holt at the time, the kind of woman who read acquisition briefs for breakfast and could walk into a boardroom and make grown men with corner offices feel like they had missed something on the agenda. She was not the kind of woman men overlooked, but she was also not the kind of woman who needed to be noticed to move forward. Elliot noticed her anyway. He was charming in the way wealthy men from old money families learn to be charming, effortlessly, performatively, and with just enough genuine warmth underneath to make you wonder whether you were reading it right. He brought her coffee at the fundraiser without asking how she took it and guessed correctly. She thought that was a good sign. It wasn't a bad marriage in the beginning. Nothing about the beginning was bad. He was attentive in the first years, proud of her in the way men are proud of capable wives before capable wives begin to outgrow the space those men have imagined for them. She left Mercer & Holt 2 years into the marriage to help Elliot restructure Crane Capital's investment portfolio, which had taken a serious hit after a failed development deal in Charlotte. That was when she first saw the actual state of the company's books. She didn't say anything dramatic. She didn't hold it over him. She sat with the numbers for 3 nights, and then she proposed a restructuring plan that Elliot took credit for at the next shareholder meeting. She let him. She was his wife. She thought that was what partnership looked like. By year 4, she had renegotiated 2 of Crane Capital's anchor contracts and quietly steered the company away from a liability that would have cost Elliot his controlling stake. He bought her the Cartier watch that year. She put it in her drawer and kept working. By year 6, she had incorporated Halcyon Bridge Partners under a name she had chosen carefully. Not hers, not his, nothing that connected to Crane Capital at the surface level. The incorporation papers were filed in Delaware. The registered agent was a law firm in Savannah that she had used before and trusted absolutely. Elliot knew she was doing some private consulting work. He had not asked the details. He was not by then particularly interested in the details of her professional life. He was interested in Sabrina Voss. Sabrina Voss, 34, was a marketing director at a hospitality group that had done work with Crane Capital on a resort development in Savannah. She was very beautiful and very comfortable being in rooms where she didn't belong, which Elliot mistook for confidence. She had been in his orbit for approximately 14 months before Lorelei became aware of her. By the time Lorelei became aware, it had already been going on for 6. Lorelei didn't confront him immediately. She was not a person who moved before she understood the full picture. She watched and she worked, and she kept the quarterly filings for Halcyon Bridge updated, and she said nothing until the morning she found a receipt in his jacket pocket for a hotel in Buckhead that she had never been invited to. She put the receipt back in his pocket. She made coffee. She went to her office and called her attorney, a woman named Catherine who had been doing family law and corporate work for 30 years, and who, when Lorelei laid out the situation, said nothing for a long moment and then said, "How much does he know about Halcyon?" "Nothing," Lorelei said. "Good," Catherine said. "Keep it that way." The morning of the divorce, Gwendolyn Crane arrived at the house before Elliot did. She drove herself, which she always did, a silver Mercedes sedan she handled with the precision of a woman who had been refusing help since 1987. She was in the kitchen when Lorelei came downstairs, standing at the counter with her reading glasses on, holding a document that Lorelei recognized immediately. "The settlement offer," Gwendolyn said, setting it down with a small, flat sound. "I read it." "I know you did," Lorelei said. "You're asking for very little." "I'm asking for what I'm owed." Gwendolyn looked at her for a long moment. She was not a cruel woman. She was a precise one, which was sometimes worse. She had never been unkind to Lorelei directly. She had simply never believed that Lorelei was the right kind of woman for her son, and she had been quiet about that belief for 9 years in the way people are quiet about a diagnosis they've already accepted and are only waiting to announce. "He's made his choice," Gwendolyn said. "I know that too," Lorelei said. She poured herself a cup of coffee and stood at the window that looked out over the back garden. The one she had replanted twice because the original landscaping had never looked right. She had spent a weekend on her knees in that garden in the second year of their marriage. Elliot had taken photographs. It had been, she thought, one of the last genuinely good weekends. "Sabrina will be here this afternoon," Gwendolyn said, and her voice was careful, the way voices are when the speaker is testing whether the information will cause a visible wound. Lorelei didn't turn from the window. "I'll be gone by noon." She was gone by 11:45. She took 3 boxes, the files she needed, and the Cartier watch, which she put in her coat pocket and later sold. She did not take the photographs. She left the garden. Crane Capital Group began its second serious decline approximately 8 months after the divorce. The first had been the Charlotte development deal in year 2, which Lorelei had quietly corrected. This one was different because there was no one to quietly correct it. The Savannah Resort project, which had been Elliot's largest active development, ran into permitting issues that then uncovered a zoning misclassification that had been in the original acquisition paperwork. Lorelei had flagged that misclassification in a memo 3 years earlier. The memo was still in the company file. No one had acted on it. After she left, no one had the context to know it mattered. The carrying costs on the resort property began compressing the company's operating margins in the second quarter. By the third quarter, 2 of Crane Capital's institutional investors had reduced their positions. By the fourth quarter, the lead lender on the Savannah project had issued a formal notice of technical default. Elliot hired 2 consultants and a turnaround specialist. The turnaround specialist identified the same problems Lorelei had seen from the beginning and proposed solutions that were, in her estimation, 6 months too late and 15% undercapitalized. The board of Crane Capital, 5 members, 3 of whom had been appointed during Gwendolyn's tenure as chair and were loyal primarily to the Crane name rather than to the company's actual financial health, met in emergency session in February and voted to pursue a strategic acquisition or merger. The word went out quietly through the appropriate channels. Crane Capital was available. Halcyon Bridge Partners had been watching Crane Capital for 11 months. Lorelei had not set out to acquire her ex-husband's company. That was important to understand about the sequence of events. She had set out to build a firm, and she had done that carefully and without fanfare over 3 years, beginning with 2 investment partners she had known from her Mercer and Holt days. Odette Fairbanks, 53, a former private equity principal who had retired early and unretired when Lorelei called, and Jasper Mould, 47, a structured finance attorney who had moved from New York to Savannah and was looking for something smaller and smarter than the work he'd been doing. Together they had built Halcyon into a mid-sized acquisition vehicle with 4 portfolio companies and a reputation in the Southeast for doing quiet, precise work without a lot of noise. When Crane Capital appeared on the market, Odette brought it to the Monday call. "It's a mess," Odette said. "Savannah project is underwater. 2 institutional investors have stepped back, and the board is operating like it's still 2019. But the underlying real estate holdings are solid, and the brand has recognition in the right rooms." She paused. "Lorelei," she said, "this is your ex-husband's company." "I know," Lorelei said. "That changes the optics. The numbers don't care about optics," Lorelei said. "Is it a viable acquisition target or isn't it?" Jasper pulled up the file he had been reviewing for the past hour. "If we come in at the right number and absorb the Savannah liability correctly, the portfolio stabilizes within 18 months. The real estate assets alone recover Halcyon's investment in under 3 years. Then we move forward," Lorelei said. There was a pause on the call. "Do you want to stay behind the curtain on this one?" Odette asked. "We can run it without your name attached until the deal is done." Lorelei thought about the driveway. She thought about the receipt in the jacket pocket and the 4 words and the watch she had sold for $4,800 to a woman in Midtown who hadn't asked where it came from. "No," she said. "I'll be in the room." The acquisition negotiation took 11 weeks. Halcyon's team, Odette as lead, Jasper on structure, and a third-party advisory firm that Halcyon used for due diligence, met with Crane Capital's board 4 times before the final session. Lorelei did not attend the first 3 meetings. This was intentional. The board needed to make their own assessment of Halcyon, without the information of her identity as a principal reshaping the conversation. Elliot was present at all 4 meetings. He was attentive and professional in the way that men who are aware their company is failing try to appear in front of people who hold the solution. He asked good questions. He demonstrated a command of the asset portfolio that surprised Odette slightly, though she didn't show it. He pushed back twice on the proposed acquisition price, both times legitimately, and Jasper adjusted the second offer accordingly. He did not ask who the principals of Halcyon were. That was either oversight or arrogance. In Lorelei's experience with Elliot, it was almost always both simultaneously. The board voted on a Thursday afternoon in March. The final terms gave Halcyon controlling interest in Crane Capital's asset portfolio, restructured the Savannah liability under a managed resolution plan, and established a transition governance committee. Elliot retained a minority stake in the residential holdings and a title, strategic advisor, non-executive. That was largely ceremonial. Gwendolyn's position on the board was not continued. The vote was 4-1. The one dissenting vote was the board member Gwendolyn had placed personally, a man named Douglas Fairfield who had been on the Crane board since 2011 and who voted no on principle rather than strategy. He was polite about it. Everyone in the room was very polite about everything. The closing meeting was scheduled for a Friday morning at the Crane Capital offices in Buckhead. Lorelee chose her clothes the night before, with the same care she gave to everything else. A grey suit, structured but not severe, the kind of thing that read as authority without announcing itself. She wore her hair down. She arrived 11 minutes early and waited in the lobby, where she had been dozens of times as Elliot's wife. The receptionist, a young man who had started after the divorce, didn't recognize her. He asked her name and she gave it, and he found it on the attendee list and directed her to the conference room. She was already seated when Elliot arrived. He stopped in the doorway. She watched his face move through the information in real time. The recognition, the recalibration. The thing that happened after recalibration, when a person realizes that what they are recalibrating toward is worse than what they expected. He sat down. He was composed. She gave him that. "You're the principal," he said. It was not quite a question. "One of three," she said. "Odette Fairbanks and Jasper Mould are the others. You've met them." He looked at the table for a moment. The other attendees, Odette, Jasper, two members of the Crane board, the attorneys on both sides, were quiet in the way people are quiet when they understand that what is happening in a room is not entirely about them. "How long has Halcyon been operational?" he asked. 6 years, she said. He did the math. She watched him do it. "You started it while we were married," he said. "While I was restructuring your company's investment portfolio in year 2, she said. "I began building something of my own. I filed the incorporation in Delaware. The first fund closed 18 months before we divorced." He was quiet. "You knew about the Savannah zoning issue," he said then, and his voice had changed slightly. Not angry. Something underneath angry that didn't have as clean a name. "I flagged it in a memo," she said, "in the shared file. March, 3 years ago." He looked at her. She held his gaze without effort because she had rehearsed this moment only once, and had decided then that the only thing she needed to do was tell the truth in the same tone she used for everything else. "I didn't know you'd left it there for me," he said. "I left it there for the company," she said. The attorneys shuffled papers. Someone across the table cleared their throat. Odette caught Lorelei's eye for half a second and looked away. The closing documents were signed in order, each party taking the pages they needed, each signature witnessed and dated. It took 40 minutes. When it was done, Jasper gathered his copies and the Crane Capital board members shook hands with the Halcyon team and filed out. Elliot remained in his chair for a moment after the others left. Lorelei was closing her folder. She was not going to make this into something theatrical. She was not there for that. "Lorelei," he said. She looked up. "I didn't know what you had built," he said. And the way he said it was not an apology exactly, but it was the closest thing to honesty she had heard from him in the last 3 years of their marriage, and she recognized it for what it was. "I know you didn't," she said, not cruelly, just accurately. "That's the whole story, Elliot." She picked up her folder and her bag and walked out through the lobby and through the glass doors and into the March air, which was cool and carried the smell of the trees along Peachtree Street, beginning to come back after winter. She stood on the sidewalk and breathed it in. Odette found her there 2 minutes later. "Board's gone. Attorneys are wrapping. Jasper wants to know if we're doing lunch." "Yes," Lorelei said. "Tell him somewhere with a good wine list." "We earned it." The Savannah project was restructured under Halcyon's management and reached stabilization 14 months later, 2 months ahead of the projection Jasper had put together on that Monday call. The residential holdings recovered their value within the projected window. Halcyon's portfolio in the southeast grew by 2 acquisitions the following year, neither of which had any connection to the Crane name. Elliot Crane kept his non-executive title for 8 months before quietly stepping away from the transition committee. His departure was mutual and professional and written up in a 2-paragraph press release that no one particularly noticed. Gwendolyn Crane sent Lorelei a letter in April, 3 weeks after the close. It was handwritten on her personal stationery, the cream-colored kind with her initials embossed at the top, and it was 4 sentences long. It said that she understood the acquisition had been conducted with complete integrity. It said that the Crane assets were in capable hands. It said she wished Lorelei well. The 4th sentence said, "I should have seen you more clearly." Lorelei read it twice. She put it in the file where she kept the things that mattered. She did not write back. Not because she was unkind, but because some things don't require an answer. The letter said what it said. She had heard it. That was enough. The garden at the house in Buckhead was sold with the property when Elliot downsized that summer. She drove past it once, not intentionally. She was coming from a meeting nearby, and she looked at it through the window of the car and thought about the weekend she had spent on her knees in the dirt, getting the lavender to take. Someone had let it overgrow since then. The borders were soft. It needed work. She thought, someone else will do it now. And she drove on, and the city opened up ahead of her, and everything she had built was still standing in the places she had left it, waiting, the way things wait when they belong to someone who knows how to take care of them.